Hey, welcome back to another video about gum. So far, this video series has mainly focused about how to use the gum tool, this editor. Today, I'd like to talk about using the result of your creation. So this user interface or this user design that you've built, how to use that in monogame. Now, monogame is not required. You can use gum with FlatRedBall, KNI, or others. You just have to look and see the documentation and look to see which frameworks are supported. Since I am the most familiar with monogame, this demo will show you how to pull your UI created in gum into monogame. We will display the UI, manipulate it through code, and even handle mouse and keyboard interactions. I'm hoping this video will be a shorter video. In the future, I plan to cut videos up into smaller bite-sized pieces, maybe 5 to 15 minutes at most. So first we'll talk about how to get gum set up in monogame. Next, we'll dive right into creating the standard elements that you see here, like circle, colored rectangle, text, sprite, directly in the code. Finally, we'll dive into the two ways you can pull in the user interface you built and designed here in the gum tool into your project. Let's get started. To get started, let's go create a project, monogame project. We're just going to call this example video project. Next, what we have to do is we have to install the gum NuGet package. And so we'll go up to Tools, Package Manager, manage the NuGet packages for the solution, browse, gum.monogame, select that, checkmark your project, and then click Install. Now that that's done, you can close the NuGet package manager. All right, now we're going to hook gum into monogame. So we're going to add something to the initialize method here. This will initialize the gum service. Then we will also add a method or a call into the update method. This will make sure that some of the basic updating for gum service will happen. We will have to modify this later in the tutorial. And the last bit is to add in code to the draw method, so that way gum can actually draw any of the components that we write. So again, if we run this, it should compile. We shouldn't have any errors, but we haven't added any UI elements, so there's nothing to display at this point in time. Let's do some basics. Let's add 3 of the basic gum elements directly through our code. So I'm just going to copy and paste some code here. This will create the rectangle, set its width and height values, and then color to white. Let's change that to red. And then it will make sure that it gets added to the managers. This is the piece that makes sure it gets drawn. So if I run this now, we can see that we have a red rectangle on the screen. Setting it back to white, running it again, now it's white. And if I remove this method, even though I've created a rectangle, I haven't actually added it to the managers, and therefore that rectangle will be lost at the end of this method call to load content, and it will not be added into the managers to be able to be updated and drawn. Let's get a little bit more on here. I'm going to add in 2 more. I'm going to add in a text instance, and I'm going to add in a sprite. Okay, now that I've added them in here, I'm just going to go ahead and run this so you can see something. So you notice that I'm getting an error message here. If you normally only work with monogame, you're used to having to use the content pipeline to load images or assets that you have in your game. With gum, these pictures can be loaded directly without using the content pipeline. But, as this error is implying, we need to do something to make sure that this is in the right spot for Gum to be able to load the file. And so the best way to do that is to use copy to output directories option of either copy always or copy if newer. So let's go over here to our project, to our content. Let's first add the picture. I've added the red ball under the content folder here. And now if I select it and I choose, instead of do not copy for the copy to output, if I instead say either copy always or copy if newer, this file will be copied to the spot where when we compile the program, it will put all of that into the bin folder, into the output folder for us to be able to access it in our program here. So now if I hit run, I now have the white rectangle, I have the red text, and I have the sprite as well. I hope this shows some of the power of the Gum code. Since we've only talked about the Gum tool, the UI editor creation tool, this, up until this point. So hopefully you can see the benefits and the powers of why this tool is useful, why the code that is the sister project for it is also useful. Now we can use both of them in our project together. A good place to go if you need to get information about Gum code, specifically the sections on monogame, is to go to the documentation. And so if we go to docs.flatredball.com/gum/gum-code/monogame, or you could even just go straight to Gum. And on the left here, you just need to expand out the Gum code versus the Gum tool. So Gum code, we have monogame, and then I'm going to be going through this tutorial here, the first few parts of this during this video. Now that we've covered some of the basics here, let's jump into the recommended way to get your user interface into monogame. Is we're going to be following along with the tutorial here just to show you some of the aspects on how to get this all set up and imported. So first, let's talk about the setup. We've already done the first few pieces. We've got the gum.monogame NuGet package added. Additionally, we've got our project, but what I'm going to do is build a new project for us. So we'll do File, New Project, File, Save Project, and we want to save this to the location where our project is. So I'm going to open this so I can get the folder path, and then we're going to go to that location, go to the content folder, and this is where I want to save it, is in this content folder. I'm going to create a new folder, call it Gum Project, and inside here I'm going to save this as just simply Gum Project. You can call it whatever you want. The folders don't have to be Gum Project. You just have to make sure that the folder and the file name are consistent when you go to your code, because we're going to be loading it based on file name. Now the next step is technically optional, but I would recommend that you use these. And that is, if we go up here to content, there is something called add forms components. Now, forms components are pre-built, standardized elements with built-in behavior and hook-in points. So these are things like buttons, text boxes, scroll bars, list boxes, and many more. So I'm going to click OK. I'm not going to include the demo screen for this. It's going to add in all these. It's going to add in those objects, but it's going to also modify the standard object slightly. Wait for that to complete. Okay. And now if we expand out elements and we expand out controls, we can see we have many different things that are here now. We've got buttons, checkboxes, combo boxes, dialog boxes, input, keyboard, list, etc. So now that we've got a new project created it's put in our content directory, we want to get this loaded into our program. So we're going to go back to Visual Studio, and we're going to go to our content folder, and we're going to find one of these files in here. It doesn't matter which one. I'll just do the project file. And now that I'm on this file, I'm going to change its copy to output directory to copy if newer. Now, we need it to be more than just this single file. We need it to be all these folders and all these files. But by doing that, if we now go to the project file itself, we can see it added an entry for us that it's going to make sure that it copies it to output. But we don't want it to be, again, this single thing, so we're going to change this to star star, which means essentially like a recursive, all files and all folders. And then we'll do star dot star to get all the files in all those subdirectories. Now, all of these items should be automatically included in our output when we run it. I'm going to go back to our game. I'm going to get rid of our standard elements that we built, so the rectangle, the text, and the sprite. And we're going to make one modification here. So on line 24, for the initialize, we're going to change this so that we're actually loading the project. We're not just initializing a blank GUM project. So now I've actually loaded a very specific project called GUM project / gumproject.gumx. And I named my folder GUM project, and I named the project GUM project. But you could, again, name these whatever you want, as long as you are consistent when you name them externally and then when you name them in code. Now I'm going to run this, and if there's no errors, this should compile, and we should get a blue blank screen again, which we do. Next, we're going to actually go through the process of adding some UI elements so we can see what it looks like. So let's go back to GUM. On the screens here, let's right-click and add a screen. Call this one title screen. In the title screen, we're going to drag two things in. The first we're going to add is we're going to add a button. So let's just add a button standard. And we're going to add a standard text as well. Go back over to our project and run it. You'll notice that it doesn't look like anything has changed. And that's because even though we're told it to load the project, it just loaded a reference to the project. It's not going to load every single screen and try to draw it on the screen. We still need to control when we want to display a specific screen on our screen. So let's stop this, and let's go ahead and go back to our initialize section here, and we are going to load the screen. So we call that title screen. We're going to load that screen. Once it's loaded, we still have to convert it to an actual graphical user interface element. And so what that means is that it is an element that will be using the rules defined from the tool, things like how far from the left and is it going to be wrapped. Now if we run this, we can see that it actually shows a button and it shows the text. But you'll notice that if I click on the button, nothing happens. So now we're going to update it so that the button will actually behave like a button. It will handle the clicks. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to save this screen as a root element that we can pass in to the update system. So the update system will handle all of the updates for all of the objects that belong to that screen. So instead of doing nothing with this, we're going to take and capture the return object, and we're going to store that. So private graphical UI element root. Now we're actually capturing that. And now we can go down to our update method, and we can pass that as the third parameter. So now when we run our code, the button should actually notice when we hover over it or click it. So we can see that functionality is now there. The functionality that's built for us because of the GUM forms controls that we added into the project. Next up, we need to be able to actually access the instances of these objects from the screen, the text instance, the button instance, so that we can handle the clicks and also change the text when we want to. So now I'm going to look for what's called text instance. And so if you change the name of your text instance in the editor, so over here, this is called text instance. If you had renamed this, you need to make sure this matches the name. So this is what I'm looking for. It's going to get that instance and change the content. So if I run the project now, it now says I am set in code instead of hello. And this still doesn't do anything. Let's fix that next. So right below here, we are going to add in a method that will handle the button click. So again, the first thing we need to do is we need to actually look for the name of our element that's in the screen, and then we told it that the click method should be assigned this functionality. So we're going to make sure that when somebody clicks something on the button, this is the code that will run. So right now, all it's going to do is just change it to button clicked at and the date time. Running it again, we have that text set in code, but when I click on this, now it says button clicked at and the time. I would encourage you to go through this very short tutorial. It goes into a lot more detail. Thanks for taking the time today to watch this video. If you have ideas for the next video, please put them in the comments. If you have questions, put them in the comments. Go to the FlatRedBall Discord or check out the GUM documentation. Thanks again.